I still remember the exact sound the door made that night, not the slam people imagine when they think of endings. Just a soft click, like someone closing a cupboard they don't plan to open again. For months before that, something had been slipping, so slowly it almost felt imaginary, the kind of distance that doesn't come with shouting or slammed plates, just quiet. She would sit on the opposite end of the couch with her laptop propped on her knees, blue light washing her face while some show murmured in the background. I'd glance over, waiting for her to laugh at a joke we always used to laugh at together, but her eyes never left the screen. "Long day?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, just tired," she'd say, still typing. Every answer a little shorter, every smile a little delayed. I kept telling myself it was the job, the deadlines, the stress. It was easier to blame her inbox than her heart. Dinners became procedural. 2 plates, same recipes we'd cooked 100 times, but the air between us felt heavier. She stopped telling me about the annoying coworker in HR or the old college friend who'd gotten married again. Her phone lived on the table now, screen facing down, buzzing quietly against the wood. She would angle her body away when it lit up. It was a tiny movement, but it might as well have been a wall. One Tuesday, she came home late, hair damp with mist from the drizzle outside, blazer clinging to her shoulders. She smelled like rain and perfume and something unfamiliar. Not bad, just not ours. I watched her toe off her heels by the door and stare at them for a second too long, like she was trying to decide if they belonged here. "Hey," I said, stirring the sauce on the stove. "Hey," she echoed, voice soft, distracted. She kissed my cheek quick, almost apologetic, then reached for a glass. Her phone buzzed again. Her hand moved faster for that than it had for me. I told myself not to be that guy. The jealous one, the paranoid one, the cliché. We'd promised each other we'd never become that couple, the ones who checked each other's phones like they were passwords to the truth. But trust is funny. It doesn't shatter all at once, it frays. The first time I saw his name, it was by accident. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, screen up for once, while she went to take a shower. Steam drifted under the bathroom door. I was cutting vegetables when the screen lit. A notification banner slid across the top. "Can't stop thinking about earlier. Ryan." My hand paused mid-slice. Carrot under the knife. The knife did not come down. There's a sound the world makes when everything you thought was solid becomes liquid. It's silence, but under it there's a roar. My ears burned. My heart didn't race, it slowed, as if it needed to take in every second in excruciating detail. I told myself it could be anything. A coworker, a joke, an inside thing I didn't get. People say things they don't mean all the time, right? But the second message popped up before I could get there. "I love seeing you like that. You deserve to feel free." Free, the word lodged in my chest like a splinter. I set the knife down. My hands were suddenly cold, despite the warmth from the stove. Steam kept slipping from under the bathroom door. She was humming. The same tune she used to hum when we got ready for bed together, brushing our teeth in sync. I didn't open the phone, didn't scroll, didn't tap. I just stared until the screen dimmed and her world with him disappeared back into black glass. At dinner, she barely looked up, fork to plate, eyes to phone, thumb scrolling under the table. The conversation was a skeleton of what it used to be. "How was your day?" I asked, the words tasting mechanical. "Busy," she said, long pause. "You?" "Same," I replied, even though it wasn't true. My day had been normal. My night was turning into something else entirely. That weekend, we were supposed to go out. A small Italian place we used to go to when we couldn't afford much else but didn't care. The place with the cracked red candle holders and mismatched chairs. She canceled that morning. "Hey, I'm slammed." "Can we rain check?" She texted me from the other room. I stared at the message, then at the wall between us. We'd gone from talking about everything to texting through plaster. I walked into the bedroom, phone still in my hand. She was at the mirror fastening an earring, not work clothes, a dress I hadn't seen in months, hair curled, eyes carefully lined. She looked beautiful, like she was about to live a life I wasn't invited to. "I thought you were slammed," I said quietly. She froze for a fraction of a second, then recovered. "Yeah, I'm just grabbing coffee with Mia first. I need girl time." "Mia moved to Chicago 6 months ago," I said. The lie hung there, sagging under its own weight. Our eyes met in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, I really looked at her. There was guilt there, and something else, something like determination. "We need to talk," I managed, not loud. Not angry, just tired. She exhaled, long and shaky, then turned to face me fully. Her lipstick was perfect. Her hands were not, they trembled. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. The words felt rehearsed. Maybe not in front of a mirror, but in her head, over and over until they sounded real. "Do what?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "This," she said, gesturing between us. "The marriage, the routine. I feel like I can't breathe." There it was, the word again. Freedom, breathe. "So you found someone who makes you feel free?" I asked. Her eyes flickered. She didn't deny it, didn't say no. Didn't even ask, "What are you talking about?" Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed we'd bought together, the one we'd argued over because she thought it was too big and I thought it was just right. Now it felt like an island neither of us could cross. "His name is Ryan," she said finally, like she was confessing to trying a new restaurant without me. "He understands me. He listens in a way I haven't felt in a long time." The air left my lungs. I sat in the chair by the window, the one I used to pile laundry on. Now it held me like a witness. "How long?" I asked. "A few months," she murmured. Her hands twisted the hem of her dress. "It started as just talking. I didn't mean for it to go this far, I swear." The rain started then, tapping against the glass in slow, deliberate fingers. The city outside blurred into streaks of gray and orange. "So what now?" I asked. My voice sounded calm. It scared me how calm. She looked at me with eyes already half gone. "I need space," she said. "I need to figure out who I am without all of this. I feel trapped, and it's not your fault, but I can't breathe here anymore." "Are you leaving?" The question came out smaller than I wanted, like it belonged to someone younger, someone who hadn't seen this coming. "I think I need to," she replied. She didn't say for a while. She didn't say just to think. She said it like it was a decision made in another room with someone else's encouragement. We packed in silence that night, her suitcase on the bed, my hands folding her clothes the way I'd learned to over years of Sunday laundry. The apartment felt like a stage after the actors have decided not to come back. At the door she hesitated, keys in her palm, bag at her feet. I watched her chest rise and fall, watched her eyes search my face for something, permission maybe, or absolution. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," she said, voice breaking for the first time. I need freedom. I need to feel alive again." The word freedom echoed between us, bouncing off every memory. I wanted to beg, to ask her to stay. To promise I'd change, we'd fix it. But it hit me then, she hadn't asked me to fight. She'd already decided. Instead, I stepped aside. The hallway behind her looked long and dim. She picked up her bag. "Take care of yourself," she whispered, like we were acquaintances parting after coffee. "You too," I said. It was all I could manage. She walked out, soft footsteps down the corridor. The elevator chimed, muffled through the door. Then that sound. That quiet final click as the door settled back into its frame. In the sudden stillness, the apartment felt impossibly large. Every empty chair, every untouched mug, every shadow in the corner whispered the same thing: you weren't enough. I walked to the window and watched the rain streak down the glass, blurring the city lights into a smear of color. Behind one of those windows, she was moving toward someone else, toward the freedom she said she needed. My phone buzzed on the table, a notification from an app I didn't care about. I glanced at it, then at the empty space where her phone used to sit. For the first time, a thought formed, not as anger, but as a faint, fragile line of self-preservation. If she needs freedom so badly, what happens to me when I finally learn to live without her? The question hung there, unanswered, as the rain kept falling and the night slowly closed in. The first night without her felt wrong in ways my body understood before my mind did. The bed was too big. The pillow next to me stayed cold. Every time I turned over, my hand reached for someone who wasn't there, grasping at air and rumpled sheets. Sleep came in fragments, 20 minutes here, half an hour there. In between there were flashes, her shoulder in the doorway, the sound of the suitcase zipper, the word freedom spiraling in my head until it didn't sound like a real word anymore. The apartment, once comfortably small, turned into a maze of reminders. Her mug by the sink with a faint ring of dried coffee, a single hair tie on the bathroom counter, her perfume still living in the closet, threaded through the fabric of my shirts. I tried to keep moving, wash the dishes, fold the blanket, open windows to let the rain-cooled air in, but no matter what I did, there was always something of hers left behind, a sweater over a chair, a book with a receipt marking the page she'd never get back to. On the second night, I wandered into the kitchen at 2 a.m., the city outside humming quietly, distant cars, occasional sirens, the low, constant buzz of life continuing without me. I poured myself a glass of water and found my eyes snagging on a magnet on the fridge. We'd bought it on a weekend trip years ago, a cheap, chipped thing shaped like a lighthouse. Under it, a takeout menu with a number carefully circled. Her handwriting, not mine. I picked up my phone before I could talk myself out of it. The contact list blurred for a second, then I found her name. My thumb hovered over call. She'd said she needed space. She'd said she needed to figure out who she was, but all I could think about was she with him now? Was he the one listening to her laugh in some dim restaurant? Was he the one she texted goodnight? I didn't call. Instead, I opened our message thread. It started with years of little things. On my way. Want anything from the store? Miss you. And then it just stopped. The last message was from me. "Are you okay?" She'd read it, didn't respond. Curiosity is a cruel thing. It dresses up as closure, as answers, as just needing to know. That's how I ended up on her social media, scrolling through pictures we used to be in together, slowly replaced by solo shots, then cropped angles that hinted at someone just outside the frame. And there he was, not in the main photo, not yet, but tagged in the comments, heart emojis, inside jokes, the kind of light, easy banter we'd once had, now redirected. Ryan, his profile was public. Handsome in that unremarkably appealing way, gym selfies, craft beer, sunsets from rooftops, marketing job, pictures with coworkers at what looked like her office. There were group photos where I spotted her at the edge, laughing at something he was saying. The caption on one shot hit harder than I expected. Surround yourself with people who make you feel alive. Alive, free, the same words she'd used, as if life with me had been some slow suffocation. I closed the app, but his face lingered. It wasn't just jealousy, it was displacement. I wasn't special. I was replaceable. Days bled into each other. Work became a place to hide. Emails, meetings, spreadsheets, things that didn't ask how I was or why my eyes looked like I hadn't slept. At my desk, surrounded by fluorescent lights and the hum of printers, I could almost forget that I went home to an echo. But there were traces of the affair everywhere, once I started noticing. An Uber receipt in our shared email, timestamp past midnight, drop-off nowhere near our apartment, credit card charges at restaurants we'd never gone to together. A hotel one afternoon, for a conference, where I knew there had been no conference. The math lined up too neatly to ignore. While I'd been grocery shopping and folding laundry and planning weekend trips she never seemed excited about, she'd been rehearsing goodbyes with someone else's hands on her waist. One evening I ran into Mia, the real one, at a coffee shop near my office. She spotted me in line, eyes widening. "Hey, stranger," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and stress. "How's everything?" It was the hesitation that did it, the way her eyes darted away before she finished the sentence. She knew, of course she knew. "It's complicated," I answered, which was a coward's way of saying, "My wife left me for a man who tells her she deserves freedom." Mia bit her lip, fingers drumming against her coffee cup. "She told me she was going to talk to you," she said softly. I'm really sorry. None of this is fair to you." There was a question lodged behind my teeth. It took everything in me to push it out. "How long have you known?" I asked. Her shoulders dipped. "A while," she admitted. "It started as venting." She said she felt stuck, like she was disappearing. Then she started talking about this guy at work who made her feel seen. "I told her to be careful. I told her to talk to you." But I think by then, it had already crossed a line. I nodded, staring at the floor tiles. Each square suddenly felt like a decision neither of us had made. "Did she ever say anything about me?" I asked. It sounded pathetic, even to me, but I needed to know if I was a villain in her new story. Mia's voice softened. "She said you were good to her," she answered. "That you always showed up, that you were steady. But she also said she felt like you stopped really seeing her, like everything became routines, bills, groceries, Netflix. She was wrong to handle it this way, but she was hurting too. It doesn't excuse it, but..." There it was again. That subtle shift where my pain and her choices were placed on the same scale, as if the cheated on and the cheater were equal victims of some vague, shared sadness. "Thanks for being honest," I said quietly. My coffee tasted like nothing. That night back in the apartment, I sat at the kitchen table, the chair opposite me empty. Her seat. I imagined her there, listening, responding, meeting me halfway in the conversation we never had. "I would have listened," I told the empty chair. "You could have told me you were drowning. You didn't have to set the house on fire to prove it." The quiet swallowed my words. Weeks passed. I started doing small, impossible things. Putting her framed photos in a drawer, not throwing them out, just softening their presence. Changing the sheets to a color she never liked, cooking for one instead of two. And slowly, despite myself, I moved on in tiny, almost invisible ways. I started staying a bit later at work, not because I needed to, but because the thought of walking into the apartment early made my chest tighten. Colleagues invited me to grab drinks, and for once I didn't say no. I laughed at stupid jokes, talked about things that had nothing to do with betrayal, even though it still sat in the back of my throat like a stone. One of my coworkers, Lena, had a way of filling silences without crowding them. She didn't ask too many questions. She didn't pity me. She just talked about her dog, or the awful coffee in the break room, or how the rain made the city feel like an old movie. One evening, after a particularly long day, we ended up walking home in the drizzle, sharing an umbrella. The air smelled like wet asphalt and exhaust, streetlights blurred in the puddles. "Thanks for distracting me," I said as we stopped at the corner where our paths split. She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Anytime, she replied. We're all just trying to stay afloat, right? Her kindness wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't charged. It was simply human. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't just pain. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized I had gone almost an entire day without checking her social media, without replaying the last conversation in my head, without measuring myself against a man named Ryan who liked rooftop bars and gym mirrors. The grief was still there, but beneath it, a thin, stubborn line of resilience had started to form. One afternoon, months after she'd left, a mutual friend sent me a screenshot. No context, just an image. It was a photo of her and Ryan at some event, his arm around her, her head tilted toward him, both of them smiling in a way that looked rehearsed and too bright. The caption read, "To new beginnings and finally choosing happiness." Something inside me shifted, not the sharp twist of jealousy this time, not the hollow ache of loss, just clarity. She had chosen, she hadn't just drifted. She'd walked away from me and toward him, and now she was rewriting the story as if the years with me had been a prelude to this moment. I stared at the photo for a long time. And then on an impulse that surprised me, I muted her account. Not blocked, not some dramatic digital severing, just quiet. That evening, the city hummed outside as usual. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the last light of day. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, my coffee, made the way I liked it, not adjusted to match her taste. For once, the empty chair across from me didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like space where something new could eventually exist, a version of me that wasn't defined by her leaving, by Ryan. By the word freedom being wielded like a weapon. As I watched the sky darken, my phone, face down on the table, buzzed. I almost didn't reach for it, almost let it pass, another meaningless notification. But when I picked it up and saw her name glowing on the screen for the first time in months, my breath caught in my throat, one new message: can we talk? For a moment, everything froze. The city sounds outside dimmed. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to step back, waiting. I stared at her name on the screen, thumb hovering over the notification. The last time we'd spoken, she'd walked out of this apartment with a suitcase and the word freedom on her lips. Now she wanted to talk. I opened the message. Can we talk? I'm nearby. No emojis, no explanation. Just those words, as if she were asking to borrow a book she'd left behind. 100 possible replies flickered through my mind. Where was this care when you walked out? What does he think about you texting me? What could you possibly have to say now? What I actually typed was simpler. When? Her response was almost instant. Now. If that's okay. I glanced around the apartment. It was cleaner than it had been in months, not because I was expecting anyone, but because I had finally started caring about my own space again. The framed photos were gone from the shelves. Her mug had been replaced. The ghost of our life had faded, leaving a quieter, lonelier, but somehow more honest version of this place. Okay, I wrote back. I'll be here. Minutes stretched. I paced the living room, then forced myself to sit. My heart thudded in my chest, not with excitement, not anymore, but with something more complicated. A mix of dread, curiosity, and a strange, detached calm. When the knock finally came, it was soft, tentative. I stood there for a second, hand on the doorknob, listening to the rain start again outside, like the sky was clearing its throat before the next scene. Then I opened the door. She looked different, same face, same eyes, but there was a tiredness around them that hadn't been there before. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, wisps escaping. No careful makeup, no curated outfit. Just jeans, a sweater, and a small, hesitant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hey, she said. The word sounded foreign in her voice, like a phrase in a language she used to speak fluently. Hey, I replied, stepping aside. She walked in slowly, like she was entering a museum dedicated to a life she used to live. Her gaze skimmed over the room, where the photos had been, the new throw on the couch, the empty wall where her favorite print used to hang. You changed some things, she murmured. Yeah, I said, needed it. We stood there a few feet apart, the silence between us full of things we hadn't said when we had the chance. Do you want coffee or something? I asked, defaulting to muscle memory. She shook her head. No, thanks, I won't stay long. I nodded and gestured toward the couch. She sat at one end. I took the chair by the window, deliberately leaving space. For a while, we just listened to the rain. It tapped against the glass, softer than that night she left, but no less insistent. How have you been? She asked finally. It was a polite question, too small for the situation. I've been figuring things out, I answered, working, sleeping more lately. Good, she said, eyes dropping to her hands. That's good. Her fingers twisted the edge of her sleeve, the same nervous habit I'd watched 1,000 times. Back then, I would have reached out, covered her hand with mine. Now I just watched. So, I said quietly, you wanted to talk. She swallowed, throat working. I did. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I did, about you. Part of me wanted to shut it down, to tell her I didn't need this. That whatever closure she was seeking wasn't my responsibility to provide. But another part, the part that had replayed our last conversation so many times it had worn grooves in my mind, leaned forward. What changed? I asked. She exhaled shakily, eyes shining in the dim light. When I left, I told myself I was choosing myself, she began. I thought I'd walk out of here and instantly feel lighter. Like one of those movie scenes where the woman steps into the sunlight and everything suddenly makes sense. Her lips twisted in something that wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't like that, she continued. The first few weeks with Ryan were exciting, I won't lie. It felt new, different. He said all the right things, told me I was brave for leaving, that I deserved more, that I'd been living small. The words pricked even now. Living small, as if loyalty and quiet routines were something to be ashamed of. And then, I asked. And then, she said slowly, life crept back in, the real version, not the fantasy. He leaves his socks everywhere. He hates talking about money. He shuts down when he's stressed. All the things I criticized you for, he just has different versions of them. She laughed once, a brittle sound. I kept waiting to feel that permanent freedom I'd built up in my head, she admitted. But I realized I'd confused chaos with aliveness. I wasn't running towards something. I was running away from myself. Her eyes met mine, full of regret. I hurt you, she said simply. I did the one thing I always swore I would never do. I betrayed you. And for a while, I told myself it was because you stopped seeing me, because we fell into routines, because you changed, but that's not the truth. Rain streaked down the window in thin lines, catching the streetlights. What is the truth then? I asked, my voice steady. The truth is I stopped talking, she said. I started building resentments in my head instead of bringing them to you. I convinced myself you wouldn't understand, so I never gave you the chance to. And when Ryan showed up and listened, it felt easier to rewrite you as the problem than to admit I was afraid to be honest. My chest tightened. She was saying the things I'd needed to hear months ago, back when there was still something to salvage. I'm not telling you this to ask for sympathy, she added quickly. I don't deserve that. I needed to own it. To say it out loud to you. Does he know you're here? I asked. Her gaze flickered. We're not together anymore, she said. The words landed with a dull thud. There it was, the turn. The part of these stories where the cheating spouse realizes what they've lost and comes back to the safe option, hoping the door is still unlocked. What happened? I asked, though part of me already knew. She took a shaky breath. In the beginning, everything was about me, she said. My freedom, my happiness. He liked being the hero in my story, but people get tired of holding up someone else's narrative. He started pulling away, canceling plans, being vague. I heard my own excuses coming out of his mouth. Her hands clenched. One night I asked him if he saw a future with me, she continued. He hesitated, said he hadn't really thought that far, that he liked keeping things light, that he didn't want to feel trapped. The word echoed in the room. I realized, she whispered, I had blown up a marriage with a man who chose me every day for someone who saw me as a temporary thrill, and I let him. Because it was easier than facing my own emptiness. Silence settled between us, the kind that feels less like absence and more like a mirror. So why are you here? I asked softly. Is this an apology, an explanation? Are you hoping for something from me? Her eyes filled then, tears gathering but not yet falling. I'm here to say I'm sorry, she said. Really, truly sorry, not the half apology I gave you before I left. I'm sorry I broke your trust. I'm sorry I made you doubt your worth. I'm sorry I chose the ugliest way to deal with my unhappiness. She paused, voice trembling. And I'm here because I miss you, she admitted. Not the idea of you. Not the routine, you, the way you listened when I rambled about stupid things, the way you remembered how I took my coffee, the way you made our home feel safe. The tears finally spilled over. I know I have no right to ask this, she continued, wiping her cheeks, but I need to know, is there any part of you that could ever consider trying again? Not now, not tomorrow. Just someday. The question hung there, suspended, fragile. A few months earlier, I would have said yes before she finished the sentence. I would have taken her back in a heartbeat, convinced that love meant enduring anything, overlooking everything. But the man sitting in that chair now was not the same one who had watched her walk out with a suitcase. Grief had carved out new spaces in me. Loneliness had forced me to see myself, not just as her husband, but as a person with limits, needs, and a right to peace. I don't hate you, I said finally. Her shoulders sagged in surprise. I thought you might, she whispered. I did, I admitted. For a while, I hated you, him, myself, the whole idea of marriage, but hate is heavy. It started to feel like dragging a suitcase I didn't pack through an airport I didn't want to be in. A ghost of a smile touched her lips at the metaphor, then faded. I'm glad you're being honest, she said quietly. I loved you, I continued. A part of me probably always will. You were my person for a long time, but what you did, it broke something I don't know how to rebuild, not to what it was. Not in a way that would be fair to either of us. Her chin trembled. So that's a no, she whispered. I searched for the right words. It's me choosing my own freedom. Not from you as a person, but from the version of us that required me to forget what happened. Tears slid down her cheeks. I deserve that, she said softly. You deserve better than this mess I made of us. We sat there, both crying quietly, the sound almost lost beneath the rain. Can you forgive me? She asked after a while. Not as a husband, just as a person you once loved. The question pierced deeper than the one about getting back together, because forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about what I wanted to carry forward. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had once been my home, the woman who had also burned it down. I don't know if I can forgive everything yet, I said slowly. But I can start. I can stop wishing you pain. I can hope you figure yourself out without destroying anyone else in the process. Maybe that's the beginning of forgiveness. She nodded, shoulders shaking. Thank you, she whispered. That's more than I deserve. We stayed like that for a long time. Not lovers, not enemies, just two people sitting in the ruins of something they'd both failed to tend in different ways. Eventually, she stood. I should go, she said. You've been kind enough already. I rose too, suddenly aware of the way the morning light had shifted into evening gray. At the door, she hesitated, just like that night months ago. Only this time, there was no suitcase. Just a quiet, aching awareness that this was not a pause. It was a different kind of ending. If you ever need anything, she began. I shook my head gently. I think what we both need, I said, is to learn how to live without reaching for each other as a reflex. She swallowed hard, then nodded. You're right, she said. Goodbye. Goodbye, I replied. She opened the door. The same soft click closed it behind her. For a long time, I just stood there, hand on the doorknob, listening to her footsteps fade. This time, there was no urge to run after her, no desperate need to pull her back inside, just a heavy, terrible, undeniable sense that something had finally settled. Still, as the rain picked up outside and the apartment filled with that familiar gray light, one question lingered in the quiet. If this was not the start of us again, what exactly was it the beginning of for me? Morning came slowly the next day, slipping through the curtains in soft bands of pale light. For the first time in months, I woke up before my alarm, not with a jolt of anxiety, but with a quiet, heavy clarity. She had come back, she had apologized, she had asked if there was a way back, and I had said no. The words still echoed in my chest, not as a shout, but as a steady, low hum. A boundary drawn not in anger, but in self-respect. I lay there for a while, watching the dust float in the shaft of light that cut across the ceiling. The apartment was silent, in that way it always was now, but the silence no longer felt like an accusation. It felt neutral, waiting. Eventually, I got up and padded into the kitchen. The floor was cool under my feet. The coffee machine hissed to life, filling the space with the familiar smell of dark roast. My mug, just mine, sat on the counter. As I waited, I caught my reflection in the window above the sink. Same face, same eyes. But there was something different around them now. Not joy, not yet, but a kind of softness that had been missing, like someone had finally stopped clenching their jaw. I took my coffee to the small table by the window and sat down. The chair across from me was still empty. It would probably be empty for a long time, and that was okay. For months, empty rooms had meant loneliness, proof that I had failed, that I'd been left. But as the morning light spread across the floor, the emptiness started to look less like a wound and more like space. Space to breathe, space to heal, space to become someone whose worth wasn't tied to whether or not he was chosen. I thought about her words the night before. How she'd said she missed me, how she'd told me Ryan had treated her like something temporary, how she finally admitted that her affair hadn't been about me not being enough, but about her refusing to face herself. A part of me hurt for her, not as my wife, not as some lost soulmate, just as a human being who had realized too late what her choices had cost. But that compassion didn't change the facts. There were things you couldn't unbreak. Trust was one of them. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos I'd missed in my first wave of cleaning. There we were at the beach, covered in sand, laughing at something off camera. There we were at a friend's wedding, her head on my shoulder. There we were in this kitchen, flour on our faces, the counter a mess. Memories used to slice. Now they stung, but less sharply. Those moments had been real. They weren't erased just because they didn't lead to forever. They were chapters in a story that had always had an ending, even if I hadn't seen the last page yet. I didn't delete the photos this time. I didn't cling to them either. I just accepted them, proof that love had existed here once, even if it didn't survive in the form I'd hoped. Later that morning, I opened the closet. Her side was mostly empty now, just a couple of forgotten hangers and a sweater she'd left behind. I took the sweater out, held it for a moment. It still carried the faintest trace of her scent. There was a time when that would have undone me. Now I felt something different, gratitude that I could feel the pang and still stay standing. I folded the sweater carefully and put it into a box with a few other remnants. Books, trinkets, small things she might one day ask for, or that I might one day choose to let go of entirely. For now they could live in the hall closet, not on display, not in the trash, just out of the way. By midday the rain had thinned to a light drizzle. I put on my jacket and stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying that washed-clean smell that comes after a storm. Cars splashed through shallow puddles. People walked by with umbrellas, collars up, eyes on their own paths. I walked with no destination in mind, just letting my feet find their rhythm. Past the cafe we used to frequent, past the park bench where we once talked for hours about futures that would never happen now. Past all the small landmarks of a shared life. Each one hurt a little. Each one also felt smaller than it used to, important but not defining. Eventually, I ended up at a small, quiet square I'd never paid much attention to before. A few trees, a couple of benches, a fountain trickling in the center, its water catching the gray light. I sat on one of the benches and watched the water ripple. The surface looked still until a drop hit. Then circles spread outward, intersecting, fading, replaced by new ones. Love had been like that, so had betrayal, so was healing. I pulled out my phone, not to check her profiles, not to reread her messages, but to open a blank note. For a moment I didn't write anything. I just sat with the quiet. Then, without planning to, I started typing. "I forgive you," I wrote, "not because what you did was okay, not because I want you back, but because I refuse to spend the rest of my life holding your choices like a weight over my own head. I forgive you so I can finally put this down." I didn't send it. It wasn't for her. It was for me. The words sat there on the screen, simple, steady. Something loosened in my chest as I read them over. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a feeling. It was a decision I would have to make again and again, every time the old anger tried to flare back up. But this was my starting point. On the walk home, the city looked different. Not brighter, exactly. Just clearer. Details emerged I'd never noticed. The ivy creeping up an old brick wall, the way the light pooled under certain street lamps, the smell of bread from a bakery I'd always walked past without looking in. Life had gone on while I'd been drowning in my own story, and life would keep going. Back at the apartment, I made dinner for one. Simple. No attempt to dress it up for anyone else's taste. I ate at the table, no phone, no TV, just the soft sounds of the building around me, footsteps in the hall, distant laughter from another floor, a door closing somewhere far away. Afterward, I stood by the window as evening settled in. The rain had stopped completely. The clouds were thinning, letting strips of pale blue peek through. I thought about the boy I had been when I met her, the man I'd tried to be for her. The version of myself who had believed that love alone could prevent this kind of ending. He deserved some compassion too. "You did your best," I said quietly, not to her this time, but to my own reflection in the glass. "You showed up. You loved, you trusted. None of that makes you foolish. It makes you human." The reflection stared back, softer now. Behind me, the apartment stretched out in its quiet simplicity. A couch, a table, a bed, walls that had seen shouting and laughter and betrayal and apology. It was not the life I had planned. It was not the marriage I had promised, but it was mine. I walked over to the bedside table and opened the drawer. Inside was my wedding ring, still resting in the small dish where I'd left it the night she moved out. I picked it up, feeling the cool metal against my skin. The circle was unbroken, but the meaning had changed. "I release you," I whispered, not to her, but to the version of myself that couldn't imagine a future without her. "I release us. I release the need to fix what doesn't want to be what it was." Gently, I placed the ring back in the dish, not thrown away, not worn, just acknowledged. Then I turned off the light. Morning light would come again tomorrow, and the next day. And the day after that, each one a quiet invitation to build something new, even if I didn't yet know what that would look like or who would someday sit in the empty chair across from me. For now, it was enough to stand in the soft stillness of this moment, not as a betrayed husband, not as a victim of someone else's choices, but as a man learning slowly, painfully, and honestly how to let go of someone else's choices, but as a man learning slowly, painfully, and honestly how to let go